Well, good afternoon, and it's Martini Live time again. So, I put my fish away and I'm back with my little frog, and I'll let him dive into the pond to see what treasure he comes up with. And I just thought of this title because I wanted to talk about this PBS series that I had recorded and finished watching last night, and it was on World War I, so I'm sure it'll be back if you haven't seen it. But it was really a revelation for me because I had no idea how much hatred and fear of German Americans rose during the war, to the point that anybody with an accent, anybody that looked German, they were rounded up. The laws were passed so they couldn't, if anybody uttered any criticism of the war or the government, they were put in jail. The Alien and Seditions Acts. It was very vicious. I had no idea that so much fear of the other was awakened during that war, and it really showed a lot about Woodrow Wilson's idealism and how it led him astray, and his taking the country to war for an ideal that America should be the savior of the world. So he was an evangelical, he was a religious person, and it seems like he projected his religious view as America's president, so that he created the ideal that America should be the make the world safe for democracy, which in a religious term would be make the world safe for Christianity. You know, they kind of go together. But I was looking, so I just thought of this. The title of this particular talk is, "What's the sound of one hand clapping?" This is an old Zen koan. What's the sound of one hand clapping? Well, then I got to thinking, well, when the center, I talk a lot about the center, the power of the center, and the center of ourself, and the center of a nation, the center of a religion, restores power. It keeps us in contact with the source of our power. It renews us. Easter was a restoration of the center. Easter is a revitalization of the center of Christianity. So everybody comes together on Easter, and then it kind of gets watered down during the year. It gets rejuvenated at Christmas, and then the winter, and then Easter pumps it back. It's kind of like a revival, you know, coming in, restore center. So if we go on a vacation, we restore center. We have to find ways to restore center because we get dissipated in the world. We get worn out, drained out, exhausted. So we restore center. We all find different ways of doing that. Well, when a nation loses center, I thought, well, you know, why does America lose center? Well, the World War I came after a huge influx of immigrants from Europe. Almost a third of the country was immigrants, all of them speaking other languages. And this is immigration is a destabilizing influence, while at the same time it's a reinvigorating influence. It's a double-edged sword. And what happens when, in a nation like America, which is based on new waves of immigration coming in, is that once you stabilize a certain immigration population and then a new wave comes in, there's a destabilization and a loss of center. So this creates an anxiety that one's center is losing. Your power is losing. Your identity is losing, is being lost, you see. So one has to restore center. So how do you restore power and center? Well, you have to have an enemy. So let's take these two symbols. So you take, this is one, you say a nation, and so it begins to lose its identity, and it begins to lose its feeling of being the one, you see, the unique one. It begins to feel it's just becoming one among others, just one among the many. It wants to be the unique one. So it has to restore center. Well, in order to restore center, they would have to separate this and find an enemy within, you see. So the enemy within restores the center here by getting rid of this, you see. So the sound of one hand clapping is when you take away the other half of your whole and make it the other. So the sound of one hand clapping is war or violence. So we've been doing that now, you know. So Trump wants to restore center because there's been this influx of immigration that destabilizes the status quo. So you restore center by separating the immigrants or the influx from the one. So this becomes the center, this becomes this one without a second, and you get rid of this, you see. That restores center. But it destroys America because America is based on welcoming new immigrants. And these immigrants are like monsoon in India. The monsoons come and restore the earth. So the immigrants restore the earth of America so it becomes fertile again with new ideas, new gene pools, new views on life, new cultures mix and create jazz and create all kinds of new arts, culinary delights, all this mix and creativity, you see. So when that becomes a threat, then we have this rise of nationalism and the rise of America first. The pure ones must rise. Only the good Americans should exist. Patriotism. And religion, unfortunately, fits into that. So you get these two together as the one without a second. In order to have the one without a second, you got to eliminate that enemy. You got to eliminate the impurity. You got to eliminate that spot, that sin, you see. Get rid of the sin, and you'll be the one without a second, and you'll be pure and the Holy One, you see. And this is the way history moves, and this is the way the tides come and go. It's not unique, but we're in that process right now where laws are changing, authorities are sending out more and more roundups to get rid of the impurities and to restore the nation to its oneness and its greatness, you see. So it's the idea that paradise has been lost, but it's in the past, so you got to restore it. It's the refusal to believe that paradise is in the future and that we move towards it. That was the difference between Sanders and Trump. Sanders was saying paradise is in the future, we the people can move towards it. Trump was saying it's in the past, we can restore it by getting rid of the problems that have polluted the water, you see. And so these are two views of the world that we can see everywhere. It's nothing new to America, but it's very difficult to see when you're swimming in it. When you swim in a culture, it's like being in a lake. If the lake's polluted, it's just the way it is. You know, you just get sick. Somebody has to come in from the outside and test the water. You can't test it while you're swimming in it. So it's very difficult to see the bigger picture when we're swimming in this tidal change, you know. But we can connect the dots. We can connect the dots, you see. So the sound of, I'm just flipping this Zen cone, the sound of one hand clapping is when you take away the other hand and you get violence. If you put both hands together, you get music. I'll see you tomorrow morning.